Now, Jean Marc Rickli is a lecturer at King's College Department of Defence Studies and joins us now live from Doha. Jean Marc Rickli, thank you for joining us here on TRT World. So we don't know who was behind this attack, but many are linking it to the arrest of Abdel Salam on Friday, the Paris suspect. What's your take on what may have happened this morning in Brussels?
Well, yeah, we have a series of evidence pointing to this arrest. Obviously, in terms of the operating mode, we have two coordinated attack, two different locations with suicide bomber. This is something that in Europe is new. It's been first time used during the Paris attack last November, and this is very characteristic of Islamic terrorism. And the fact that the location, the sites that have been targeted are also of symbolic value. The airport, where it's a very busy place, but also the Melbeck metro station, very close to the EU institution, is a sign that fits within the pattern of previous terrorist attack that we have seen in Europe previously.
Jean-Marc, if you can, how will security services now start trying to respond to this? One thing that we do know about this Brussels attack is that there have been many warnings about an imminent attack on the city and in and around Belgium. How can security forces respond to what's happened to them this morning?
Well, obviously there's a lockdown going on. I think that the police has some clues already about who might be behind that. The security forces in Belgium has not completely caught off guard. There were some evidences. They were still chasing people. Still, some people, a guy called Najim al-Ashrari, who is believed to be the bomb maker of the Paris attack and closely associated with about is still on the run. So the police, with what happened over the last year and a half, has strong evidence, has clues. But obviously now you cannot discard that it's a different cell or that is a different organization. So all these different orientations have to be investigated.
Jean-Marc, if you can try and give us some insight into the fact that it seems to have been suicide bombings this time. Obviously, suicide bombings were used in the Paris attacks, and some reports that were out over the weekend suggest that there may well be a large Daesh cell in Europe with bomb factories, bomb makers, and a large support network. Would the work that you do and your analysis support a theory like that?
Well, you have to realize that we have shifted paradigm, terrorist paradigm with ISIS. Before, with Al-Qaeda, you had a hierarchical organization that was planning some terror attack, but it was limited in the number of cells that they would rely on. With ISIS, what you have is, in a way, the crowdsourcing of terrorism. So just in Belgium, we have more than 500 Belgians who have moved to Syria, and per capita is the highest. It's a country with the highest proportion of jihadists. So what you had a strong reserve, if you want, of possible candidates for terrorist attack, and that is a real headache for intelligence services, because if you really want to trace and to track all these potential terrorists, it requires a lot of resources, and obviously European states are not prepared for this. And on top of that, you have the national legislation where cooperation has demonstrated by the Paris attacks, the two Paris attacks. Cooperation is still not optimal. Therefore, terrorists are using that. In 2014, made in the most, the first ISIS attack on Belgian territories exactly used that kind of loopholes in European security. Is a French citizen who conducted a terrorist attack in Belgium in the museum in Brussels, because the coordination in the intelligence services is not optimal. So basically, you are in the worst case scenario where intelligence services are overwhelmed by an abundance of potential candidates for terrorist attack.
Absolutely, and you say, Jean-Marc, that they're well overwhelmed, and that's quite evident from what's happened today in Brussels. We will have seen over the past few weeks and months there's been a huge security presence on the streets of Brussels. And of course, this is Europe. This is, a huge economy with vast amounts of wealth, but you can't spend all your money on defence and you can't watch everyone. So what can they do? How can they take tangible steps to try and stop these sort of things happening on the streets of Europe?
That's very difficult. That's the dilemma that Western states are confronted with now, because if you want to guarantee security, you would need to have extensive security measures, intrusive security measures, and this is in contradiction to the principle of personal freedom in democracy. So I think that governments have to educate the population in resilience. And unfortunately, the European population, Western population, but also population in the Middle East have to live with the reality that terrorists can attack anytime, that no system is bulletproof. And there lies the paradox of terrorism. The strength of terrorism is that for the intelligence agencies to be successful, they have to be successful 100% of the time, whereas a terrorist has to be successful 1% of the time. If one attack goes through, this is a success for the terrorist. So there is this asymmetry. So I think that unfortunately the population has to live with this condition that, yeah, you might expect a terrorist attack anytime, but then you have to put things into perspective. You still have more chances to die by a bite of a mosquito than a terrorist attack. So I think you have to keep the sense of proportion in mind.
Jean Marc Rickli, really good to speak to you. We have to leave it there, unfortunately, but thank you so much for the analysis. Thank you, Jean Marc.